In this video, we're going to talk about philosophy and theatre during the classical age. During the Archaic Age, we talked about how Greek philosophers were really interested in understanding the universe and using mathematics and science to explain the universe. Now we move to the Classical Age, and we find that Greek philosophers are increasingly interested in moving beyond studying the universe more abstractly to studying and understanding human interactions. And so some of these philosophers were known as the sophists. They charged a fee to teach methods of arguing, and they claimed that it was possible to find the answer to any question just by talking about it, and that making a good argument was part of how to reach the answer. However, they were opposed by the philosopher Plato, who taught in Athens from 390 to 350, so right after the Peloponnesian War. He answered that the sophists were wrong, that you can't come to an understanding of the world simply by arguing, but there are absolute truths, and that it's the role of the philosopher to seek after those truths rather than simply seeking to win an argument. And so he set down the debates that his teacher, Socrates, had with the sophists. The debates that Plato recorded shows that Socrates would ask a question in an effort to understand or begin a dialogue about how humans should interact with one another. Socrates rejected material pleasures and said that human beings gain pleasure and meaning in their life from immaterial qualities and experiences, such as friendship and justice and prudence. And so he was trying to understand how to practice these immaterial qualities that we refer to as virtues. In 399, however, Socrates was charged with atheism, accused with corrupting the youth away from the traditional pagan polytheistic religions of the gods, and was executed. Plato, perhaps influenced by Socrates' execution, taught that the world is an imperfect reflection of perfect forms that exist in an immaterial reality. And so he says that there is an immaterial world in which we have the perfect form of everything, the perfect form of a chair or a laptop or a desk. And then in our world, we only have in our world, we have material versions of these, but none of the versions are perfect. They're all imperfect in some way. But we know that all chairs are chairs through what was imprinted on our soul, a memory of the perfect chair and the perfect desk, a memory of that immaterial reality that was imprinted on our soul or imprinted on our mind even before we were born. And so this is how we come to understand reality. But it means that for Plato to understand reality, we must turn in to our consciousness rather than, and then use that knowledge to understand the natural world. And Aristotle, who was Plato's most famous student, most brilliant student, is going to turn that around. Aristotle is one of the greatest systematic thinkers who ever lived. He was a great student of the natural world. And Aristotle flips Plato's approach to learning around. He's going to say that the basis of learning is through experiencing things in the natural world. And by experiencing 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 20 chairs, we can understand what makes them all a chair, what they have in common. So it's not as though there's this immaterial perfect object that we have to match them to and back again. Aristotle also argued that human beings are most naturally suited to living in a community, and thereby that living the good life, living a life that was most fulfilling, was found in humans living in community with one another. And so often Aristotle and Plato's philosophy are seen as the foundations of Western political thought, these ideas about how societies should be governed, how people should live together. After these three great philosophers, we find new schools emerging and flourishing in Greece. And these philosophical schools are more a reflection of the individualism that I spoke about in the previous video. The individualism that reflects a Greek culture where individual horizons are shrinking. And so the first of these is cynicism, that's developed by Diogenes. Diogenes reflected any kind of society, so it's the opposite from Aristotle. Aristotle says human beings best flourish in society. Diogenes says all society is a mistake. Private property, marriage, religion, all these things that Aristotle had said were fundamental parts of society. And so Diogenes tried to reject all material things and all material expectations as superfluous. And so his vision for human beings was as living totally naturally, living like dogs. So we have accounts of him and his followers where they're defecating in the streets because they see bathrooms as superfluous and an attachment to material things. Other Greeks practiced what was called Stoicism, a more resigned philosophy. And Stoicism said everything in the universe is predetermined to happen. And so it's not as though individuals can shape and affect these events in any way. It's best simply to learn how to accept them. And so you can see how this is totally different from the ethos that inspired the Spartans and the Athenians to resist the Persians. If they had been Stoics at this time, you definitely wouldn't have had 300 men resisting the Persian invasion. There would have been this sense of the Persian invasion is what's predetermined to happen. Lastly, we have Epicurus, who founds Epicureanism. And he, like Diogenes, rejects the idea that you can find truth, that you can find absolute truths, and instead argues that human beings should seek happiness. He questioned whether there was a life after death, and so instead he told his followers simply to seek pleasure in the present moment and in the present life without worrying about the consequences. And so you can see how these three later philosophies are quite destructive when it comes to living in community. You have people exercising all their bodily functions in the street. You have people who aren't willing to stand up and defend their society or to try and contribute positively to their society because they think it's predetermined. And you have people who are just acting on impulse without troubling about the consequences. So I'm going to stop the video here. This is what we're going to talk about for Greek philosophy. We'll talk about drama in the next one.